everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If it's your first time here, I'm Charlotte Foley and I build homes in Accra, Ghana. Today, I'm taking you guys through the foundation process of our new project at Sakumono. This is on a wetland with loose soil close to the lagoon and the sea. First off, we started by doing our survey works. The surveyors got on site to pick the boundaries of the land to help in positioning the structure exactly as it is in the architectural drawings. In my previous video, I explained why we use a total station for all our setting out. I'll put the link in the description below. After picking the boundaries, we got back to site the next day and started marking the positions of the structure. Due to the nature of the soil, we decided to make changes to the construction process. We decided to reduce the amount of excavation to be done. With this approach, we only excavated the trenches for the external walls and pits for both the internal and external. No trenches were dug for the internal footings. Since the land has a high water table, we dug a test pit to ascertain the depth at which we would encounter groundwater, so as to help us plan the construction process. At about 1 meter, we encountered water. Since the depth of excavation of the columns were to be placed at 1.4 meters, we had to be sure of the severity of the groundwater. The water wasn't so much, so we were good to go. At the same time, the steel benders were on site, bending their mats and columns for the foundation works. Sometimes I forget that I post on YouTube. I forgot to take videos of that. But always remember to ensure that your steel bender bends the rings at 135 degrees as to 90 degrees. Excavation started, and as expected, areas of the land which were almost flat didn't have groundwater coming out, but we encountered water at the slopy areas. After excavating the pits for the columns, the surveyor got back to site to mark the trenches for excavations to start for the external walls. So here you can see the markings for the trenches. So these markings are all for the external walls. We have no markings for the internal walls. From the video, you can tell some of the pits were fine, while others had water in them. Areas with water were parts where the land slopes. It had also rained 2 days prior, so it got worse. So at this point, we're done with all excavation works and we're ready to start concrete works for the blinding. This was the day of casting of the blinding. Due to the nature of the soil of the site, we had sides of the pits breaking in, hence the reason for the change in construction method. We had to take all of the sand out again, which was a lot of work. Before casting, we placed DPMs. As you can see, this is a 500 micron DPM, which was placed in the trenches and the pits before pouring the concrete for the blinding. Before cutting the DPM, I ensured that they were all cut 30 cm extra on all 4 sides in order to cover the sides of the column bases as an extra precaution. We also added waterproofing additives and super plasticizers into our concrete mix to reduce water ingress. After the blinding was done, the surveyors got on site to mark the corners of the columns. This serves as a guide to the masons and steel benders when setting and bracing the columns. Over here, we see them setting the columns. We still had water coming through some of the pits through the sides, so we placed DPM along that perimeter before casting the column bases. After setting and bracing all the columns, the next thing was casting of column bases and trenches of the external walls. We completed the casting in 1 day. The next day, we started block laying for the external walls. We marked the level of the concrete to be cast for the internal columns. This was done to ensure that the internal columns and external walls are all on the same level. So as you can see, we're picking the levels for the columns and marking them while they lay the blocks. Block laying took about 3 days to complete. The carpenter got to site to board the external and internal columns, followed by the casting of the columns. Once that was done, we painted the internal and external parts of the walls, as well as the independent columns, with bituminous paint. Next day, we started filling the foundation and backfilling the external areas. We made sure all the columns were cast on the same level as the external walls before compaction. With this method, you need to ensure that your compaction is done right so as to prevent the ground beams from suspending when settlement occurs later. After several days of filling and watering, we were set to compact. From the video, you can tell some parts had sunk in. This was after a heavy rainfall. This is why it is always important to add water after filling. This helps reduce the air voids in the soil and increases the soil density during compaction. So from here you can see we started compacting, and this was only the first phase of compaction. After the carpenters got on site and started working on the formwork for the ground beams, we went for 450 by 150 ground beams, all round areas which were initially designed for strip footings. This method helps reduce the cost of excavation, the cost of blocks, the cost of block laying, and also the cost of concrete. We place DPM under all the ground beams to prevent rising damp. Always make sure your foundation is watertight. The steel benders place the rods into the formwork, and we got right to casting of the ground beams. The ground beams were cast to a height of 30 cm, leaving the extra 15 cm for the oversized concrete. After casting, we painted the sides of the beams with bituminous paint. It acts as a barrier against water penetration. It is always important to include this step in your foundation. This is how it turned out after. We went back to backfill and compact for the second time. Then we got to laying the waste pipes for the ground floor. We always place small size chippings around the pipes to maintain the stability of the soil. This was the final layout of the plumbing works for the ground floor bathroom, laundry, powder room, and boys' quarters. Always remember to have your plumber place floor drains in areas prone to flooding. This helps drain excess water in case of emergencies. Also make sure you are certain of the type of WC and floor drain you intend to use in your house. This way, your waste pipes are placed at the right positions, which reduces the chances of breaking parts of your floors and walls later, which incurs unforeseen costs to your project. After plumbing works, we laid DPM over the entire area and the steel bender got to site. He laid rods over the entire floor. Always ensure you have adequate spacing. I got these really cool spaces, so kindly let me know if you are interested. The carpenter got to site right after to board the sides of the foundation, and we picked levels to ensure that we have the same concrete thickness all around. This is very important to avoid thick screeding later. In some severe cases, you would have to resort to stepping parts of your house. Next was casting of the oversized concrete. Casting took a day, and we added admixtures to the concrete to enhance its strength and workability. Here's a final look of the foundation after casting, which brings us to the end of today's video. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed watching and you find it helpful. Send this to a friend who may need to see this, and let me know your thoughts and questions in the comments. Would you try this foundation style? Thanks for watching and see you on the next one. Bye.